Hello, everybody. Early start this morning, depending, of course, on where you are. Welcome to the second day of the conference. So, I just want to say something about some changes to the program. We've decided to reschedule the way that we are going to present the play. The play My Daily Bread was supposed to be screened this morning, followed by a little bit of discussion. It's a play written and produced by UWC students, which speaks very directly to the conference themes. So we are going to put it on the Remo platform, and you will be free to be able to watch it at any stage that you like. Jackie, one of the organizers, will tell us more about that. But what we did want to do, especially because of the energy, the bubbling energy that was left over from the last performance and the tail end of discussion in many of the panels, is to revisit the discussion about the play and the impact that it's had on you, and also I think just surface some of the themes, the threads that have come up on the first day, and that you just like to air in this plenary context, because often we kind of don't find ourselves able to talk generally amongst us all. So we've still got a smallish crowd, but yeah, just to get the conversation going. I unfortunately with the dance performance missed some things because my connection was bad. So I was a bit frustrated because I saw odd bits, even though fortunately I've seen the dance before. But one of the things that stayed with me was what Jackie said about communion and the idea of relationality, which I think is it creeps up again, it surfaces again and again in much of the recent work critiquing the Anthropocene, for example, and talking about new ways of being human. And yeah, I was thinking about that, especially in the light of other themes that were raised in relation to food politics and food injustices. The constant shadow of exploitation, of guilt, of destroying others in order for the human body to survive. So yeah, for me, the idea of relationality and reciprocity seems to be such an important guiding principle in thinking about the other worlds that we'd like to see in terms of human relationships to food. So that was something that I was left with, and I'm wondering whether my fellow panelists or anybody from the floor would like to say anything about what they were left with. Please bear in mind also, you don't have to put your comments in the chat. We can invite you up onto the stage. That's easily done, especially because we have a small audience now. But maybe I can ask. Sorry, okay. Lynn.
Yes, so for me, I slept over it, Jackie. It was quite intriguing. And what came to mind is really those five senses you were trying to open through that dance. And I thought of Mary Haim's first presentation yesterday in panel 1. And for me, that theme of eating yourself to death and changing it to eating yourself to life really resonated with what you did for us yesterday. So, yeah, I'll just pause there. For me, it was that coming back from death to life, and how does one do that using those five senses? And you were really awakening every part of it when I look at your dance and think beyond it.
I think that's beautifully put,
Yeah.
Lynn. Jackie, do you want to respond?
Yes. Yeah, well, I really appreciate that, what you're saying about opening up the senses, and I think one of the other things that I've been trying to do, because you mentioned the concepts of life and death, and one of the things that I've been trying to do for a long time is to become acceptant. and seeing death as a way of it's just a change, you know, and that if we are in the process of transformation, then something is always dying and something is always coming to life. And so, you know, if one thinks about the senses, if someone's in a coma, they always, the doctors will say, well, they probably they can still hear, you know. So you just speak to them. We really don't. I mean, I'm saying this because we don't really understand how far, how deep our senses are, and also like when one awakens the senses, I think one can also begin to imagine that there's always going to be this kind of liminal body that we can have, this body that can be in between states of life and death, you know, that it's not the one or the other, but it's kind of, it's another kind of interpenetration, I think, that I'm trying to find in the way I think about life and think about living life, you know. And that is also another kind of indigenous knowledge system that, you know, that there's always this line, and along every point in the line, something is created and something is, you know, something is changed all the time. There's processes of life and death all along the line at every single moment. Yeah, so I think it's like an ongoing kind of I'm trying to find deeper ways all the time to find these interpenetrations so that we don't collapse with, we don't necessarily collapse with change, you know, we don't feel like overwhelmed, overcome, we don't feel like that we can always feel victorious in a way. I mean, maybe that's the wrong word, because, you know, yesterday, so like when was asking me the idea of human, and given the fact that Black people have been relegated to animal status all along, so we can choose to go, I'm a human, or you can go like, well, maybe if I, instead of just going from the point of resistance as it's against someone else, which actually just centralizes their arguments all the time, how about just sinking into this thing that this other, and seeing what comes up? And then there's a different kind of reaction that one, or response, I should say, there's a different kind of response that one has to what might have been perceived as a negative. Something else. That's what I'm trying to do, I think, you know, is that it's not always about that. The fight doesn't have to be the fight doesn't always have to be, so what's the word? It's too early for me. I don't always have to be jumping and toying to show my protest. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. That there are more ways. That there are other ways. There are many different ways to protest. And often those ways, I think many of those ways, much like our breath is invisible, but without that breath, we'll die. Much like the light of the sun is almost invisible. We forget that these things are here, but they sustain us. And I think that the test of how we've been discriminated, of our of all of these, you know, just like of feeling in despair, of all of these things. There are other ways to resist it, and those ways are possibly invisible, but very relevant, because they touch us viscerally, they touch our senses, and they touch other people's senses. And it's, yeah, I think to work with all the time and remind myself that it really matters what we don't see, what we don't think we see. So I appreciate what you're saying, and you know, that the senses are coming alive, because otherwise we kind of forget that we have these senses, right? We go to the head space all the time.
Does anybody else want to respond?
Yeah, maybe I could come in briefly. Thank you. Thanks so much, Jackie, for that. I mean, you know, beyond the senses, I mean, it's the sensorial. It's quite powerful in thinking about your performance and those dimensions, the mode of doing something in the performance. What comes through beyond the senses, it seems, is not just simply the material, but I think what you're suggesting, the symbolic, in terms of what deductions one can make. And I've been thinking about food, there's also, in this broader context of change and transformation that you talk about, pretty much like a silkworm that becomes a butterfly, the kind of evolution. It's not an appropriate food meta, but I mean, you can read a lot into it, and the change is never negative, but there's always the prospect of something else developing. And if I had to bring back the project, the work that you're doing, and the performance, it's also about the kind of thinking around choices and scripts that govern us in some ways, isn't it?
Yes, yes,
And the kind
yes.
of knowledge that accrues. And I mean, if you think about it, it's about also how we act in particular settings, and almost sometimes unconsciously, we incorporate it in bodily repetition in a way. And what you're trying to do is also to de-automate that in some ways, to make us a little more reflexive about that. I don't know.
Yes.
That's some takeaway that I have.
That's lovely. That's really lovely. I mean, when you're talking about the silkworm and you're saying that it's change, but there's also a shedding. There's a shedding. We have to let go of certain things. There's and letting go. Yeah, there's something beautiful in that. Lovely what you're saying. Yeah, these kinds of tropes and these narratives that we kind of just allow ourselves to respond with all the time, and we need to. For me, the praying mantis is interesting because it waits. It waits, and it takes the longest routes, and and that's why it's a really lovely teacher. I feel like we need to know. We need to react immediately, and I think that's part of that zeitgeist. We're on our nerves all the time. Tension, we're shaking all the, even when we.
Yeah. So there's a question in the chat. It's a comment and a question, I think, from, who is it from?
Juliana.
Juliana. Hi, Juliana. Welcome. Thank you to everybody who contributed to yesterday's discussions. I particularly love Dr. Hames.
I'm just.
First, about the familiarity around cooking and cooking processes and homegrown recipes. In addition, confirming my questions around the big companies colonizing plant-based food. I also love Jackie's dance and connection to the earth, and the discussion around thinking directly about being human while creating a different reality and alertness when we are faced with danger. She's also remarking on Habiba's narrative about her connection to Cape Town family and a sense of identity. Resonated with me as well. Thank you, everyone. Just to pick up on Juliana's comment about Jackie's dance and take it again to eating. I mean, I think it's made me think also that there's sometimes a weirdly human arrogance about our obsession with eating healthily, eating ethically, and I mean, that in itself needs to be deconstructed. I'm not saying that we must not pay attention, and I myself, what do you call it? I don't eat red meat for ethical and other reasons. But it's that, I think it's that heaviness that you're talking about, Jackie, that business of taking a stand, which really comes from a belief that I'm a special kind of creature who has to take a special stand. And I don't know, it's a hard thing to think through, because of course We have certain ethical and political beliefs as human beings, and we must have them. But how can we also have them more lightly and be happier, happier creatures? How can we be less human and be more creature-like? I don't know. I'm talking in circles. Maybe somebody wants to take it in another direction. Lebo, not
I,
necessarily response.
I think for me it's what was brought by Jackie's dance and the other presentations was just our relationship with the earth, with the land, but also our relationships with other creatures on that land, our relationships with other creatures and even plants. And in terms of food and eating, then how do we think about, and I'm talking as a carnivore, I love my meat, but how do we do that sustainably? And I dare say respectfully, respecting those other creatures that we consume. That sounds very religious, but I don't mean it that way. But it just brought to the fore just how arrogant human beings have been, as Desiree says, in terms of relating to the other beings on the planet.
Yeah.
Jack,
If I
did you
could
want to
maybe
say
say
something?
something.
Take you as
Yeah, no, I'm respectful is a very good word actually, because if we are thinking about relationality, and that is an energetic field, and gives us, right? Food keeps you going. Food is an energy. There is a sensibility of, and you said thinking about things, the intention with what to eat with intent. So there's this lovely, people, we say bon appetit and enjoy your meal. We say things like that before we eat, and the Japanese say itadakimasu, which is literally in a very rough kind of way is saying thank you to allowing yourself, for giving yourself to me. So there's there's an acknowledgement that of the food itself that is giving itself to you, and that you're talking about that connection with the land, and I think that those kinds of things are important, that then one begins to feel a kind of an energy with things. I mean, I'm not a carnivore. I'm not a carnivore, but it's also, I mean, I agree with Desiree that there's this kind of, people have almost an evangelical kind of sense about how they go about talking about their food choices, and sometimes it makes me want to eat all the wrong things just because of how people are carrying on about how good they are and how right they are in doing what, and so then I get that kind of child. And I want to go and eat like all the junk food in front of you just to show you I can. I mean, which is a silly kind of response, But it's this thing about energy, I think, and about intention and really kind of feeling. Then one begins, something feeds you, and then it doesn't have to be guilt. Nature, everything is eating everything. Also, things are everything. Everything else, there's a whole how things work. Even the mantis, it eats like itself. It eats of its own. In order to sustain its own. So I think if we let go of those kinds of moralistic views that we have on things, which often is to us, to what's embedded in us unconsciously even. If we just let go of those, or take a moment and realize that is actually what's holding us back, of just feeling an energetic connection and making space for something that the earth offers us. and then we offer back, because whatever comes in comes out again, you know. I mean, we offering back too.
Mm, mm. No, absolutely. I think we're going to have to stop now so that
We
we
have to
have a
stop.
pause for before the panels at 9. So give us 5 minutes. But Jackie, I just want to say thank you again, both for yesterday and for today, because I think this conversation today also allowed us to surface a lot of what we just kind of paused with yesterday. So many thanks,
Thank you.
and hopefully you will be joining us maybe from time to
Yes,
time.
I'll be around. I'll be around, in and out.
Great. Thank you again.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everybody.
So
Have a
people
lovely
Thank
will
day,
have
you.
rest of the day.
5-minute pause, and then we'll go into, you can choose, check the program, we'll go into one of 2 panels.
Yes, I also want to say yesterday we had empty spaces for posters. 2 of them are all up, and the play that we were supposed to have during this time will be also in the one of those lounges. So please visit there during your meet and greet and take a look. Thank you.